Good afternoon. My name is Kate Murphy, and I am the meeting planner for the Independent Association of Home Instead Franchisees. On behalf of the Association Education Committee, I would like to welcome you to the next session of our webinar series brought to you by InZone. This title is How to Solve the Mysteries of Workers' Compensation, Part 1 of a 3-part series. Before we get started, I have one housekeeping item to share with you. Please type all questions into the chat and we will have a Q&A session throughout the webinar. Now, I would like to introduce you to our presenter from InZone, Dennis Powers. He is a seasoned professional in the insurance industry when it comes to home healthcare, and he puts his expertise to good use in this webinar designed to educate businesses like yours, so you can be better prepared for your unique risks. Now, I will hand it over to Dennis to begin the presentation.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak again in front of the association. My name is Dennis Powers. Formerly, we were known as Lamb Little Company, but we merged with InZone a couple of years ago, back in December of 2021. I am 52 years old. I live in Mount Prospect, Illinois, suburb of Chicago. Born and raised in Chicago, and I first met my first home instead doing this exact presentation I'm doing for you back in, I think, late 2009. 2010. I went to school for law enforcement. I wanted to be a cop. When I lived in Chicago, I would be the kid that was running down the street waving at police officers. I very much wanted to do that. I did ride-alongs with a local police department to me. I also went to school for it, but when I was doing the ride-alongs, they had 1,100 people apply for 3 openings, and there were no opportunities to really become a police officer. So I got into insurance, I handled claims, and the first presentation I did was at an occupational health clinic. I met a guy by the name of Bob Cook, and now I work with between 90 and 100 home insteads, and I've been part of the association for a couple of years. So this presentation I did yesterday, forgive me, I still have a COVID cough from over 2 months ago. And I haven't done this in a while, but it should be about 40 minutes or so. We encourage questions, so let's get into it. Are there limitations to my work comp policy? So a common, sorry, I'm having a little connection problem here. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm having a little connection problem.
No problem, Dennis.
There's always glitches. It might be easier. I'm having some. I'm going to turn my camera off for a second here. So there are no limitations to the work comp policy. People think there are, but it's unlimited coverage. We're going to cover that. We're going to go over why premiums are so high. Talk about your rates, how they vary from carrier to carrier, even within the carriers themselves. We're going to spend some time on the experience rating. We're going to talk about, why we advise against paying small claims yourself. And then we're going to talk about, why it's important to understand how to properly report claims. So let's get into it. And my mouth will catch up with my brain in a second. I haven't done this since October, really. But I want to make sure you get a lot of takeaways here. By the way, this is a 2-part presentation. When I first did this presentation and met my first home instead, it was about an hour long. We had some other speakers, and it's a little bit too long of a time to spend. It's overload. This is, so we broke it into 2 halves. And what we're going to do on this first half is really more the financial impact that premiums have on your overall cost for your bottom line. This is really meant for owners. It's not really meant for staff, but the presentation we're doing next Wednesday, highly encourage your staff to attend. We're going to talk about preventing claims from happening and what to do when they do happen. But getting back on task with this one, Most of actually almost all the home insteads I know of, they are in a guaranteed cost program. That means essentially you're paying premiums to an insurance carrier. In return, they're going to cover your claims. Once in a blue moon, we'll come across someone who's in a captive program. I've been working with the group for 14 years. If I thought a captive was a good idea, I'd probably have the biggest captive out there. What that is basically a bunch of people pooling together their resources. And when I say resources, I'm talking their own money, letters of credit, and they're creating their own mini insurance company. The biggest flaw with that is that you are sharing in other people's claims. So if you have a big claim, the other people in the captive are paying for it. So most people are in guaranteed cost programs, which is almost every owner I work with. So again, if you pay $50,000 a year for your insurance premiums, if you have $2 million worth of claims, you're only on the hook for $50,000, which is good. But if you don't have any claims, you're not getting that money back. So that's just something I wanted to talk about. It's really important to understand the financial rating of your insurance carrier and just really, try to make yourself more involved in the process. What we're going to cover now, it's again, this presentation is a little more technical. We're going to talk about the things that really impact your premiums. Number 1 and number 3 are really the insurance company controls. Number 2 is your experience rating, and that's something that you have more control over. Taking people back to work, preventing claims from happening in the first place. So let's go with number 1. By the way, I turned my camera off because I have 3 monitors going right now, and I get lost in myself. I see myself, in one monitor, and my presentation's on one, and the notes are on the other. So I'll turn my camera back on in a second once I can get my bearings here. So here's the big takeaway here is that when you're trying to figure out your work comp program, your agent is asking you, hey, what do you think your payrolls are going to be for the upcoming year? You're estimating your payrolls. So, what we're seeing here is we're seeing the different class codes, and we're seeing, I'll move on to the next slide, and some similar class codes to other industries. So 8835 is a very common class code for home health care. They lump home health care, skilled care, and non-skilled care together. In some states, it's a different code, but I would say probably out of the 50 states, probably at least 40 of them are using class code 8835. So what you'll notice is you'll have, salesperson marketing 8742, clerical office. Those are the 3 common codes for home health care. But if you were a manufacturer, if you were a contractor, you're going to see the same class codes, 8742, 8810, and the same rate. What makes you different is what they call the governing class code, which is 8835 right here, the highlighted code of 8835. And so with that, there goes a definition. So there's more similarities than differences in a day-to-day job of skilled care and non-skilled care. So that's why they're lumped together under the same class code. But in like California, not California, but Pennsylvania, Delaware, a few other states, they have different class codes for skilled versus non-skilled. And I remember when I first met the Home Instead, I started meeting more and more, and people kept asking me, like, why are we lumped in with skilled care? And I said, be careful what you wish for, because the class code for the rate for non-skilled care is usually double that of skilled care. So let me get on to the next slide. Now, this is the only mistake I found in my presentation. This is the same presentation. It's been updated since 2009. But when I first did this presentation, I met my first Home Instead, I was using the manufacturing class code, and the rate was $5.02. But so I never changed that. But the class code we changed. I never caught that part of it though. But it's important to understand that one of the ways an insurance carrier can be competitive is to use different rates. So I'm going to pull over a slide here in a second, something over in a second, but I want to show you how your baseline premiums are calculated. So what we're looking at here is an example of someone that has $1 million of estimated payroll for caregivers. You know, you might see homemaker services, home, public, and traveling healthcare. Again, marketing, sales, we usually see a little bit of payroll there, but look how different the rates are. So let me do this while I'm thinking about it. Here, just take a look at all these different rates in these different states. These are carriers we have access to. California, at one point, the rates I remember back in the day were like $12, $13, $15 every $100 of payroll. But look at Arizona. I mean, they're at a dollar. I remember when I first started working with the home insteads in Illinois, the average rate was like $3.50. Now it's under $2. So so this shows you a variance of rates. So, but I mentioned one of the highlights was, you have like, I'm going to use AmTrust as an example. AmTrust is a big carrier. We can use them directly in most of the country, except for the Northeast, like Pennsylvania, New England, New Jersey. But under the AmTrust umbrella, they have 4 different rates. So if you see my cursor, I'll just pick on Connecticut here. Wesco is AmTrust. AmTrust is AmTrust. Technology is AmTrust. Security is AmTrust. Those are 4 different insurance companies that all have different rates. And you see, if you scroll down, you'll see Wesco is always the highest. So I find home instead offices that are with Wesco, sometimes it's there for a reason, because maybe you've had claims, they're trying to get more premium. And that's one way they get more premium, is to put you in a higher tier. You've got NorGuard, Guard, and EastGuard. All 3 of those are Guard insurance, but there's 3 different rates with that. So it's important. Like Georgia is probably our strongest state. We have a not exclusive but semi-exclusive carrier, $1.54 rate. But look at the rate for Wesco, $2.68. So I've moved all my home insteads over to that insurance carrier, and we've saved people 40% off their workers' comp. So that is one key way an insurance company can get to the premiums that they want to get to, is by using the rates. So what happens is, it's really just a formula. They multiply your payroll times the rate divided by 100, and that's what I call your baseline premium. $50,000 is the baseline. Before they put any kind of experience rating, any kind of credits or debits, that's where you're starting from. So if you have if let's say this $5.02 is a high rate, if you've got a $3 rate, it's going to be a much lower manual premium. So your starting point is a lot lower. So I'm sorry, it went ahead. Again, I'm looking at 3 different monitors here. So that is a key factor. Let me talk about NCCI really quick before we go on the experience rating. NCCI is the National Council of Compensation Insurance. They're based out of Boca Raton, Florida. And they are in, I think, 36 of the 50 states. And one of the key things they do is they develop their own rates. They have actuaries that review all the claims data, and from industry to industry, they come up with suggested rates, and they'll share those rates with every work comp carrier out there. So insurance companies can use the NCCI rate, or like AmTrust or Guard, they could also file their own rates, and they just use a different name under the AmTrust umbrella. And I showed you the 4 of them. And then the other thing that NCCI does is they develop your experience rating. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to do a little bit of deeper dive and hopefully give you a couple really big takeaways that I think has really helped a lot of owners over the years. So we had our baseline premium there with the manual premium, and you see the experience rating is a 1.17. So an experience rating is a factor that can make your premiums go up or down. In this case, it's going to make that premium go up 17%, almost $9,000 of additional premium. To me and a team I work with, I'm the guy that does the home instead stuff. But we have a home health care team, and I've done this presentation for the HCAOA several times live. And this is such an important thing because you have a lot of control over this. You don't have a control over the rates, you don't have a control over the credits or debits, but you have a control over loss prevention, bringing employees back to work. So let's explain, what is the experience rating? If you can remember where my cursor is, I want you to remember, try to make a mental note of two things here. This 0.18, this box A right here, and then specifically this line right here. Rating reflects a decrease of 70% medical only, primary and excess. And I'll come back to that in a little bit and explain why that's so important. That's one of the big takeaways. So the way I explain an experience rating to people is it's a snapshot of your industry, your business versus others in your industry. It's comparison, 3-year comparison of your claims and your payrolls versus others like you. So you're not going to be compared to a manufacturer. It's going to be others with the 8835 class code. And the whole theory behind this, and again, even though NCCI is only in 36 of the 50 states, the other 14 states use a very similar, they use an experience rating. In fact, most of the states, it's the identical formulas. It just looks different on paper. And the spirit of it is, what can we do to reward those people that are trying their damnedest to prevent claims from happening, and or taking back injured caregivers or office employees if they're injured and they have restrictions. If they're doing all those things, they're going to have good loss experience, smaller claims. So let's reward them with an experience rating under 1.00, because 1.00, you might think it's good. It's actually average. You're a C student, you're not getting a credit or a debit. I think the lowest experience rating I've seen was like a 0.66, which means someone's getting 34% off their workers' comp. And unfortunately, I've had 2 or 3 home insteads that have had experience ratings over a 2.00, which means they're paying over double for their premiums. So it doesn't include the current year, the first year of a claim. It's year 2, year 3, year 4. And the reason they don't include the current year is a claim is going to change a lot in the first year. It's not fully matured yet. I'll explain how the reserves are done in a little bit in the presentation. So once it's been open for a year, then it will show up on your experience rating. So the underwriter knows it's there, but NCCI doesn't put on your EMOD yet. It's year 2, year 3, year 4, and then it drops off. I should probably go this way, and then drops off. So it will be painful for a couple, for 3 years once on there. But one thing you need to know is, hands down, this is the most important thing that underwriters look at. It tells a story. I mean, it doesn't show a lot, but it tells a story. If you've got a 0.66 experience rating, that underwriter is going to be exciting. They're going to want your business. They're going to be printing money off of you. If you have a 2.00, it's going to be at the bottom of a stack or probably in the garbage can, because some insurance companies have thresholds where your EMOD cannot go over a certain threshold. Let's say, like one carrier, it's a 1.25. If it's over a 1.25, it's an automatic declination. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, no exceptions. Some have a 150, 1.75. So it can slam a lot of doors shut just by them looking at this experience rating before they even hear any stories about the claims. So that's always the most important thing. Now, if you're a new business, which I don't think many of you are, but there was a window where I would work with a brand new territory. You don't have an experience rating your first 3 years. You got to be in business for 3 years. Your 4th year, you get your experience rating. But again, every home instead I've worked with is established, or they bought an established business from someone who's been around for a while. So let's kind of break this down, because it's really, there's a lot of answers in here for you. And I don't know why, but when I got on the agency side, my years of doing work comp claims were the most miserable years of my life. The grass was never greener if I went somewhere else. And by the way, I became a claim adjuster because I was a private investigator out of necessity, I had to get my internship, and I got a paid job, a paid internship, being a private investigator. I had a van. I'm 52 now, but I was 21 years old, and I drove around the country and I filmed insurance fraud. I had a camera that was this big and the lens was this big, and I could film you from football fields away. It was almost all insurance fraud. But I was working 90 hours a week, and I wasn't dating. I had no fun. I was in a van, and if I wasn't in a van, I was sleeping because I was so exhausted. You got to be there before the sun comes up, so it's 4:35 in the morning. You pull off at 6 or 7. You type in your notes, fall asleep, and just repeat the next day. So I had a job offer to work undercover at Motorola. If you ever watch NFL games, it's the headsets is one of their big products. So Motorola up in Northern Illinois wanted me to start there and then spend time at that plant and go from plant to plant and look for drug use and employee theft. But my mom worked for an insurance company. All the claims all the investigating I was doing was pretty much work comp fraud. So I took that job, and then I did claims for a very long time. So I say that background because I can tell you that it's been almost 30 years of being in this industry, and the people that do the decision making with whether they're going to insure you or renew your insurance absolutely do not talk to the claims adjusters. All they look at is this at renewal time and loss runs, which we'll show in a second here. They don't talk to the adjuster to get the story behind the claim. They just look at what's on the paper. So all those years of being a claim adjuster, it was miserable. I hated that job. And then I got on the agency side, and I finally saw the impact that my claim handling had on an experience rating. And I never saw this when I was a claim adjuster, and that was 12 miserable years. And I never saw this. So I gravitated towards this because a lot of answers are in here. And we'll expose some of those in a second. So what we're doing here is we're using an old example from 2014, and I'll explain that why a little bit later. But what I'm doing here is I'm breaking this down into three parts. And what basically, if you can follow the cursor, what we're doing is we're breaking it down into 3 policy years. And again, not counting the current policy year. So the whole left side of the worksheet is where they come up with what your losses are supposed to look like, your expected losses, okay? And then what they're doing is they're looking at your payrolls and and then the industry average for claims. The right side is all of your actual claims, okay? So we'll break it down a little bit more, section by section. So at the bottom, we'll get to this section in a second, but at the end of the day, they do your actual, which is the right side, versus your expected on the left side A, to come up with your experience rating. We'll get to where we'll make that make you understand that in a second. So the left side, this looks pretty similar to that premium summary sheet we had before, where you had the different class codes. So 8835 is caregivers, 8810 is clerical, 8742 is sales. And again, if you remember, those rates were a lot lower for clerical and for sales. In fact, one takeaway is I highly encourage owners to consider insuring themselves, not excluding yourself from the work comp policy. It's going to cost you hundreds of dollars to insure yourself, not thousands of dollars. If you are in the office, we had a little wave in the last couple of years, I'm sure you can understand, where office workers and owners were going out and helping caregive because of the caregiver shortage. If you did that, or if you're thinking about doing that and you are included on your payroll's included, if the auditor finds that out, even if you just did it for 2 days, they'll take all your payroll and they'll move it over to the caregiving bucket. But if you truly are separated and you're just office, or maybe you're marketing, that rate is a fraction of what the other thing is. And the reason I talk about that is because almost everyone has a knee-jerk reaction. Well, I need to exclude myself. Why would I want to be on policy? So I had an owner throw out his back lifting some copy paper, and sure enough, he tried to turn a claim into his health insurance, and they declined it. But he was excluded from his work comp policy, so there was nowhere to go other for him to pay those out of pocket. Then another owner the co-insurance and co-payments they go through, those far exceeded the cost of being on the policy. So think about that. And again, it's 8810 or 8742. So what they're doing here is they're taking your audited payrolls, which is this column 4 right here, and they're coming up with what your expected losses are supposed to be. So some of you, I know in New York, I work with a lot of the New York owners. There are services that will look at experience rating worksheets and they'll look for errors, and they do happen from time to time. So take it upon yourself to look at your audit and look at your experience rating worksheet, because think about it, this is $3 million in payroll, and someone's manually typing this information in. If they miss that zero, your expected losses are a lot lower than they should be. So for every 20 or 30 of these, there's an error. And it's important to, and it's an easy fix. You give the information to the insurance company, they make the correction, they send the information in to NCCI, and they'll make the correction. You'll get you'll probably get a refund. So I show this section because this is where they come up with what your losses are supposed to look like, but there could be errors there. Now we're on the right side of the experience rating worksheet, and we'll kind of go back and forth between these 4 different columns and loss runs. So what this column here is, and again, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, California are examples of states that do not use NCCI. But Wisconsin's formula is exactly the same. What they're doing in this column is they're itemizing individual claims unless they're medical only claims and they're under $2,000. So these are 3 individual claims, and then there's 23 medical only claims. Otherwise, you'd have a really long experience rating worksheet. So again, I told you that the EMOD worksheet, experience rating worksheet, is the first thing that an underwriter gravitates towards. The loss runs, which we're seeing right here, flesh out what I call the skeleton. The NCCI is a skeleton. This provides a lot more details. And what they're showing here is they're showing the claim number, O for open, F for final, showing when the injury happened, when it was reported. They do keep track of that, by the way. But more importantly, itemized reserves for indemnity, medical. Those are ones that impact your experience rating. Don't worry about the insurance company fighting the good fight and hiring lawyers, hiring someone like me to get in a van down by the river and film insurance fraud. Expenses don't affect your experience rating. Indemnity, medical do. Indemnity is temporary total disability, temporary partial disability, settlements. Medical, straightforward medical bills. Those are the 2 that impact your experience rating. Okay. So this is what goes along when when I'm submitting something to an insurance company. These loss runs are going along with the experience rating to the underwriter with hopes that I don't have big claims like this. Like this one here. By the way, these are real claims. It just changed the name. And this was a manufacturer, not a home instead. But by the way, the first guy I met, the reason I met him, he was with one of the vendors for Home Instead at the time, and he had legitimate claims. They were real claims. In fact, the one I remember, again, this is late 2009. He's since sold. He lives in Tennessee. I saw him about a year ago. His name was Bob Cook, if anyone knew who he was. He had a caregiver going with a client to a hair salon and going down cement stairs, and the caregiver was wearing flip-flops. And the flip-flops caught the edge of the stair. She fell forward. She broke both her wrists. So what happened with him was he had 3 legitimate claims. He was with Accident Fund. I remember it was Accident Fund, and they were legit. And Accident Fund did their thing. They did a good job. He got a notification from Accident Fund saying, bye-bye. We're losing money off of you. We're non-renewing you. So he called his agent, and he went from $30,000 to $72,000 like that overnight. And he was going to be put in the assigned risk pool. So I just happened to be doing a seminar. That's how I was trying to meet people, was going to do these presentations in front of larger audiences, hoping I could make a connection with a few people. And then he introduced me to Mike Mellinger, and Mike Mellinger said, Dennis, take the show on the road. No one's getting this information. And that's why I work with between 90 and 100 offices now. But he really had pain points because his premiums more than doubled. So what we did was we really got on top of the claims. And by doing so, you order loss runs, you look at the reserves. So, and it gives, again, it tells you who it is, how it happened. And now we're going to go to where I give you a couple good takeaways. This column here, IJ is injury code, O for open, F for final. So you want to see a lot of F. So F is in Frank for final. If I'm working with a new owner, I look for the O's, and I wonder, especially if they're about to drop off and they've been on there for a couple of years, why is this claim still open? So I mean, last week I did a claim review with a newer owner to me. I wasn't the agent at the time, but we were able to go over claims that predated me and really get some movement on those. But in trying to get the claims closed, a path to closure. So the injury codes that I put on this EMOD are the two more common ones. 6 is medical only. It was pretty straightforward. Someone cuts a finger, strains their back, they go to the clinic, and they're discharged, maybe 1 or 2 office visits. Typically, insurance companies will set aside a preset number of dollars for medical only claims, and they'll close those files automatically within 90 days. 5 is temporary total disability. That means the worker cannot work for you. The doctor's completely written them off of work, and that's class code 5. Those are the 2 most common we see. So, all right, so takeaway number 1, which is really important, let's talk about proper reporting of the claims. So I met an owner, a homestead owner, who had a knee-jerk reaction to report claims where an employee missed an employee. It could be a caregiver, an office worker. If they missed a day of work or 2 days of work or 3 days of work, he would report on his report, first report of injury, it said, is this a lost workday case? And he would check yes every single time. If you remember, I had mentioned earlier, remember that bottom line where it says medical only 70%. What happens is if you turn in a claim as a medical only claim, and this is most of the country. I remember there was a time maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Missouri didn't do this, but now they are. But I think almost all the states are now doing this. They're discounting medical only claims by 70% with how they impact your experience rating. So it's something that I think so many owners don't realize, that there's a waiting period, and we'll talk more about that in part 2 of the presentation, but let me talk about it now. I'll show it to you in part 2. There's a waiting period in all states. It's really meant to deter fraud. It's so easy for anyone to fabricate a soft tissue injury, a sprain, strain type of injury, to have a doctor write them off of work for 2 or 3 days. Then they go to Disney and they take their family to Disney, and you're paying it or the insurance company is paying it. Well, in Illinois, the waiting period is 3 days. In a lot of states, it's 7 days. That means by law, in Illinois, I'm stick with Illinois, you are not responsible. You nor the insurance company are responsible for paying those first 3 days of lost wages, unless they miss more than 14 consecutive days. Then they'll get paid those 3 days. If it's a 7-day waiting period, it's usually 21 days. So if you have someone who's injured and they're going to miss 1 or 2 days, report those claims as medical only, because in majority of the states, those claims will be discounted by 70%. If you have a knee-jerk reaction like that owner did a long time ago, you cannot undo that. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube once you've reported it as lost time. It stays there for good, classified as a 5, and the full weight of that claim impacts your experience rating. So that's takeaway number 1, is always err on be cautious and go with medical only. Now, listen, if someone tears their knee up or cuts off a finger, you know they're going to be off of work for an extended period of time, definitely report it as indemnity, lost time. But if it's strains, sprains, I pulled my back, those are the ones you want to make sure you report as medical only, okay? Does that make sense? I haven't seen any questions yet, but I want to make sure that that part makes sense. But then that kind of ties in with the other takeaway. Stop paying those bills yourself. I mean, so many times I go meet owners and they'd have that red medical claim form on their desk, and I'm like, what's that all about? Well, we're thinking about, paying that ourselves. And I can tell you right now, insurance companies don't want you paying claims yourself, because sometimes those things blow up on you. Then you try to hand over this complicated claim all of a sudden to a claim adjuster, and they couldn't investigate it before. Again, that's why if you see this box here, that's why they keep track of when you found out about it and when you reported it. Look, in this case, it was reported 33 days later, 77 days later. It doesn't really give the adjuster a chance to really do a good investigation. But again, the best example I gave yesterday when I did this presentation for the first time in a while, it's a manufacturing client of mine I met at a seminar, and she had a worker, is a screw manufacturer. The worker cut his finger to the bone. So they did some x-rays, and it was an $1,800 bill. She paid it out of pocket. And when I took that claim, I took her experience rating, threw that claim in there, it would, let's just use it, a 1.00 was her EMOD. It only raised her EMOD to a 1.01, 1 percentage point. So when I plugged that 1 percentage point in versus her premiums, it was like $100 extra a year for the 3 years that claim would have been on there. So $300 of additional premium versus $1,800 paid out of pocket. So, and again, if insurance companies aren't seeing these claims, they're not seeing trends that are happening. They can't get in there and try to help you prevent them from happening. So I just highly discourage paying claims out of your own pocket. Any questions so far? I'm glad I got through all the glitches. I'm still getting used to the 3 screens, but hopefully you're getting some good information here, people. By the way, we're kind of getting close to the end, but I got some other things to say. But I want to talk about getting more involved and being more involved with the claim adjusters. And this column on the experience rating worksheet is actual insured losses, or actual incurred losses. What that is what they've paid plus what they have reserved equals incurred. And we'll come back to that. So here you have the total is $605,000 on this bottom claim, and this was a real claim for somebody. It was one of my manufacturers. And again, what they care about is the indemnity and the medical. That's all they care about when it comes to the experience rating. Okay, so when I'm a claim adjuster and you report a claim to the insurance company, it comes on my desk. And then the way it's supposed to work, within 24 to 48 hours, I'm supposed to contact you and talk to you about what happened. Then I'm supposed to call the injured worker and hopefully take a recorded statement from them. And then thirdly, I'm going to reach out to the clinic, the doctor, get the medical records, and try to get a sense of how bad is this claim? How long is this person going to treat for? What is the prognosis? What's my plan of attack? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside X amount of dollars for indemnity. And then again, indemnity would be temporary total disability, temporary partial disability, when the worker is losing time or wages from being off, or being with or getting paid lesser wages if they come back to the office. And then medical, this person needs a shoulder surgery. I need to set aside X amount of dollars for the surgery, then the therapy, future visits. So you do that in the beginning. And the problem that I see, and it hasn't gotten better, is I went to school to be a police officer, and I know a lot of you changed your careers, but I don't think anyone ever saw a syllabus for claim adjusting at a university or when you're in high school. No one ever saw a TV show about claim adjusters. You just end up there. My job is kind of fun because I handled all the dirty claims, and I like to deny things and settle things. But at the end of the day, it was claims. I had 200 claims, and it was overwhelming. I couldn't review every claim every month. I still talk to adjusters that have over 200 claims, and you feel it. When I'm talking to a home instead and trying to review a claim, I could see they haven't seen this claim in 3 or 4 months. And the important takeaway is that let's use January 1st as an example. Halfway through your policy, which would be July 1st, all your claims data, all of your, they call it a stat card. All your claims data, all your audited payrolls go into NCCI or the other bureaus for the other states. That's when they start doing a calculation of your next experience rating. So usually what happens is like a 2-month period, they do the calculation. You get your new experience rating, usually about 3 to 4 months in advance of your next renewal. So from a timing perspective, when I'm trying to, if I know of a claim, I don't know of claims unless people tell me there's claims to monitor. We're trying to talk to the adjuster and say, hey, listen, you've got $5,000 in reserves for lost wages, but the person returned to work 6 months ago. Can you lower those reserves? And we just had this happen with one of the owners in Massachusetts. The insurance company was going to non-renew them. We all got together on a claim review. This is last week, I think last Thursday. And just by getting them all together, because they hadn't talked in so long, the adjuster didn't know certain information, and he cut the reserves by 2/3. And now they have rescinded their non-renewal, and they've offered a renewal quote. Because, again, an adjuster can't review every file every month. And it's impossible. And what you'll really feel, and I'm sure you all have felt this or your staff has, you hear from the adjuster a couple of times in the beginning and then crickets. And then claims are settled and you're like, wait, what happened? At the end of the day, being in the guaranteed cost program, the insurance company has final say. So it's really complicated. As a policy holder, when you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And then suddenly you get a massive increase like Bob did. I can talk about Bob because he sold his franchise in 2019. But it's awful to see that happen, and no one prepared you for it. Okay, so we got a few more slides left and a couple more thoughts on things. Actual primary losses. So the reason we've never really updated the dates on this is because there was a long window where the first $5,000 ever claimed did the most damage. And then anything above that, if you remember that 0.18 I asked you to remember, anything above that, and it varies from person to person, but on your email, you'll see that number, but it might be a 0.07 or 0.11. Anything in excess of $5,000 was multiplied by that factor, and then that was considered excess. I'll show you that in a second here. So for over a decade, $5,000 flat. I think right now it's 18,500. It has crept up and up and up and up and up. So I want to keep this the way it is to show people there's more incentive now than ever to prevent claims from happening and to take workers back when they've got restrictions. So this is how they do the calculation. Primary losses, that first 18.5 goes in this bucket, okay, and up to 18.5. And then there's a stabilizing value here to make sure you don't have a 0 experience rating. And then the excess, again, anything above the 18.5 times that 0.18 for this example. And that's how you come up with your experience rating. So what I do for a lot of owners is I gravitated towards this eMod years ago. I try to show people what your best case scenario is. And I could actually identify your claims, write them down. It's chicken scratch. I write it down. It's not sexy, but I can show you what your best case scenario is. And then if you can actually see, wow, I have a 1.17, like in this example, but I could be at a 0.75. That's going to save me 20, 30 grand every year. I'm going to bring those caregivers in. I'm going to spend some money and bring them in, do some training. I'm going to amp it up with train different kinds of training or whatever. You might invest some money into that. The insurance carriers don't have the best resources for loss control. Your industry is really hard to prevent claims from happening. We do cover that in part 2 quite a bit. But it's just really understanding what your best case scenario could be, and then just mentally preparing. Like this one owner, I had to say, hey, listen, I gotta tell you, this is the guy we just did a different claim review with last week. I expect your experience rating to go up this much because the claims are just showing up on there, and it's going to be on there for 3 years. So it's just mentally good to know, and make sure you've got enough cash set aside for that. And then we'll get to last couple slides. The one thing I do is, again, when I know, most carriers don't tell, not just me, but other agents, when a claim is reported. We don't report work comp claims because we don't have date of birth, all the private information you would have. I report auto claims, crime claims, everything but workers' comp to insurance carriers. But with workers' comp, I don't know when a claim goes in. I usually find out at the end of the year when I'm going through the renewal. I'm like, oh, where'd that come from? So I can help the people I work with when I know about the claims. So I do find myself helping a lot more newer owners I work with their older claims. And if I wasn't a claim adjuster, I would never have been able to do that. But I haven't seen any competitors in 14 years, like Lockton or Silverstone or whoever, that advocate. So I try my best. I'm not perfect, but I try my best when I know the claim's out there. And so normally what I do is, and when there's a new claim, please report the claim, get the claim number, get the claim adjuster information. Let's get a call within the first week. And so it's usually me, the owner, HR, and the claim adjuster, sometimes a supervisor. And these are usually for like problematic claims. We don't believe it happened. This is going to be a big one. And we just all get together in the beginning. Then they follow up with an email. Then it's really easy once a month to say, hey, listen, what's going on with that claim? Give us an update. Then they're accountable. And then you are too, as because you usually have, you got to tell them about, can you take someone back to work? And just keep the communication going always, because it's just so stagnant. After that first month, there are times where a whole year will go by and you have not heard from a claim adjuster, and then you find out that they settled the claim. It's just awful. And then utilize loss control. I've got a lot of good ideas. And we'll talk about some of those in part 2. On our website, inzoneinsurance.com. If you go on the website, there's a blog section, and there's a recording of this, the full presentation, maybe not as in depth, but there's a 20-minute post-offer medical questionnaire that I do with a home instead in Gastonia, North Carolina, where they've used this thing I put out 7 or 8 years ago, where it's a questionnaire. After they've made a job offer to a caregiver, they go over this questionnaire about pre-existing conditions. And you'll see me interview them for 20 minutes. And they've been using that for years. They barely ever have big claims anymore. Please, between now and next Wednesday, if you're going to sit through the next presentation with your staff, find it. It's 20 minutes long, and I can send you the paperwork. And it's just something that, the 3 big claims I see, slips, trips, and falls, patient handling, and then aggravations of pre-existing conditions. That post-offer medical questionnaire can really help with that. Lastly, last slide, and then again, if there's any questions, credits and debits. I don't know if there's anyone from New Jersey on here, but there are some unique states. Massachusetts, Florida, Wisconsin, and New Jersey are weird states where everybody has to use the same rates. All the carriers have to use the same rates. So there's no difference in pricing. Wisconsin and Florida, what they try to do is they try to offer dividend plans. But quality of the carrier is really important. Otherwise, if they do a bad job of the claims, you're not going to get anything back. Massachusetts doesn't have anything. They don't have any dividends or whatnot. But in New Jersey, I work with a couple owners there. And what they do a little differently is they have a dividend program called the Garden State Dividend. But I see a lot of the owners in New Jersey. If you know any of them, or if you're on this presentation, the carriers can put a credit on. And one carrier, ICW, they can only put a 15% credit on. but another carrier puts a 25% credit on. So the two owners I work with out there are getting 10% more credit upfront, and the potential is high as 13% on a dividend. So those are four very unique states, but the ability to add credits or debits, sometimes debits, which is more premium, trying to get more premium to get a higher premium to cover what they think your losses are going to look like. But if you have a 0.66 experience rating, no claims, you're going to get someone who's going to either give you the best rate that they have, which is not Wesco. Remember, it's not Wesco. I've got a few clients with Wesco, but they're there for a reason. Either they're just too small, and the carrier wants a higher rate. But I find so many people that are with Wesco, and then I take over the policy. We try to get them the technology rate, which is 20% lower. So just the better off you look on paper, the more aggressive people will get. My offering to you all is we're going to do the second half of the presentation next week. If anyone wants to talk off a line, you've got my contact information, dpowers@inzoneinsurance.com. I'll show you a little sneak peek of the next presentation. This is what we're going to cover. Probably another 45 minutes, but highly encourage staff to be involved in this one. A lot of things that will help you with your bottom line. And again, I work with a lot of owners, they test drive me, and I can help as much as I can with pre-existing claims that are open, because I just don't really ever see any of my competitors advocating for people. So that's all I have. It looks like a chat thing came up. Oh, so I talked a lot and I had some glitches in the beginning, but hopefully you got some good takeaways. Any questions?
Awesome. I don't see any questions in there. I also put in the chat your email so that if they have any questions, they can reach out to you directly.
Yeah, please do. I have a cheat sheet for majority of the states, which shows you that waiting period. I just sent someone one from Kentucky. If I don't have it, I can show you a website that will show you what your waiting period is. And I'll show that, well, actually here, I'll show you right now. It looks like this. Bear with me here. It looks like this. Oh, wait, went too far. It looks, damn. There we go. It looks like that. This is, I think, North Carolina. And I've got one for most states. And it shows you the waiting period. So it's a little sneak peek of what we're going to go over next week. So again, thank you so much. Next week, hopefully a little bit smoother in the beginning. But I really hope you can bring your staff. A lot of things I think will really help you, and a lot of things to talk about after we present. And thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank Dennis for spending time with us this afternoon and sharing your knowledge and expertise on workers' compensation. Thank you all also for attending, and we will see you next week for part 2 of a 3-part series. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.